You know that moment when your body betrays you? Someone says something cruel. Your boss calls you into the office. A car swerves into your lane, and instead of reacting, instead of speaking up or moving or doing anything at all, you just freeze. Your mind goes blank, your muscles lock, words disappear. You stand there like a deer caught in headlights, watching everything happen in slow motion, while some part of you screams to do something, anything. Then later, sometimes hours later, you finally think of what you should have said, what you should have done, and you wonder what is wrong with you, why you always freeze when it matters most. Here is what nobody told you. That freeze is not a character flaw. It is not weakness. It is not something broken inside you. It is your nervous system activating a survival program that is older than language itself. A program that saved your ancestors' lives millions of years before humans existed. And the reason you cannot just think your way out of it is because it operates below the level of conscious thought. But here is what changes everything. In the last decade, neuroscientists have mapped exactly how this freeze response works. They have identified the specific neural circuits involved, and they have discovered something remarkable. You can reset it, not in weeks of therapy, not through years of meditation. In about 90 seconds, using nothing but your body. That is what I am going to teach you today. Not a coping mechanism, not a way to manage the freeze, an actual physiological reset that interrupts the pattern and brings your nervous system back online. Let me start by explaining what is actually happening when you freeze. Your autonomic nervous system has three main modes of operation. Most people know about two of them. The sympathetic mode is fight or flight. Heart racing, muscles tensing, ready for action. The parasympathetic mode is rest and digest. Calm, relaxed, recovering. But there is a third mode that most people have never heard of. It is called the dorsal vagal state, and it is the freeze response. When your nervous system perceives a threat that is too overwhelming to fight or flee from, it does something ancient and desperate. It shuts down, like a possum playing dead, or a gazelle going limp in a lion's mouth. This is not a choice. This is not you being a coward. This is a survival mechanism that evolved because sometimes, in the face of an overwhelming predator, your best chance of survival was to appear already dead. The problem is that your nervous system cannot always tell the difference between a lion and your boss, between a predator and an awkward social situation, between actual mortal danger and the stress of the modern life, so it deploys this ancient shutdown program in situations where it is completely unhelpful. During a confrontation at work, in the middle of an argument with your partner, when you need to speak up but the words just will not come. And once the freeze response activates, you cannot just decide to snap out of it. The part of your brain that makes decisions has essentially gone offline. You are operating from the brainstem now, from survival circuits that do not respond to logic or willpower. This is why telling yourself to calm down does not work, why positive thinking fails, why you can know intellectually that there is no real danger and still feel completely frozen. The freeze response is not happening in your mind. It is happening in your body, which means the solution has to come through your body too. Here is where it gets interesting. Your vagus nerve is the main communication highway between your brain and your body. It is the longest cranial nerve you have, running from your brainstem all the way down through your chest and into your abdomen, touching your heart, your lungs, your digestive system. The vagus nerve has two main branches. The ventral vagal branch is the newer one, evolutionarily speaking. It handles social engagement, calm alertness, the ability to connect with others. When this branch is active, you feel safe, present, able to think clearly and respond appropriately. The dorsal vagal branch is the ancient one, and when this branch takes over, that is when you freeze. Heart rate drops, blood pressure falls, muscles go slack. The body prepares for shutdown, for dissociation, for playing dead. The key insight from the research is this: these two branches are not just passive responders to threat. They can be deliberately activated through specific physical inputs. You can send signals up the vagus nerve that shift which branch is dominant. In other words, you can manually switch yourself out of freeze and back into a functional state, not by thinking about it, by doing specific things with your body that your nervous system interprets as safety signals. Let me teach you the reset protocol. This works in 3 phases, and each phase builds on the previous one. The whole thing takes about 90 seconds once you know it. But the first time through, take your time. Let your body learn what each step feels like. Phase 1 is called orienting. When you are in freeze, your awareness collapses inward. You lose track of where you are, what is around you, the actual reality of the present moment. Your nervous system is stuck in a loop, responding to a threat that may not even exist anymore. Orienting breaks that loop by forcing your nervous system to take in new information about the environment. Here is how you do it. Without moving your head, let your eyes slowly scan the room. Move them all the way to the left, then slowly all the way to the right. Do this 2 or 3 times. Now let your head follow your eyes. Turn your head slowly to look over your left shoulder. Let your eyes explore what is there. Then slowly turn to look over your right shoulder. Really look. Notice colours, shapes, objects, distances. This is not just casual looking around. This is deliberate activation of your orienting response, which is hardwired into your brainstem. When you orient to your environment, you are telling your nervous system to gather new data about potential threats. And when your nervous system scans the environment and finds no immediate danger, it begins to down-regulate the freeze response. Not because you decided it was safe, because it checked and confirmed it was safe. You might notice something shifting already, a slight release in your shoulders, a deeper breath. This is your ventral vagal system starting to come back online. Phase 2 is vocalization. Your vocal cords are directly connected to the vagus nerve. When you use your voice in specific ways, you send signals up the vagus nerve that activate its calming branches. The freeze response often includes a sense of having no voice, being unable to speak, words stuck in your throat. Using your actual physical voice reverses that pattern. Start with a simple hum, low and steady, in a comfortable pitch. Feel the vibration in your throat, in your chest. Hum for about 5 seconds. Then let it fade, and notice the resonance that remains. Now try a gentle vocal sigh. Let sound come out with your exhale. Not words, just tone. Like a quiet ah as the breath leaves you. The specific sounds matter less than the vibration. You are physically stimulating the vagus nerve through the tissues of your throat. Each vibration sends signals to your brainstem that says something important. You are safe enough to make sound. Think about it. If you were actually being hunted by a predator, the last thing you would do is make noise. Vocalization is an inherent safety signal. When you hum, when you sigh, when you use your voice, your nervous system receives the message that the immediate threat has passed. Some people notice significant shifts after just a few seconds of humming. The fog starts to lift. The sense of paralysis begins to ease. Phase 3 is movement. The freeze response locks your muscles. It prepares your body for impact, for stillness, for playing dead. Breaking the freeze requires reminding your body that it can move. But here is the key. You do not want to force big movements. That can actually re-trigger the stress response. Instead, you start small. Micro movements that gently wake up the frozen tissues. Start with your hands. Slowly spread your fingers wide, then slowly make a fist. Do this several times, noticing every sensation. The stretch, the contraction, the aliveness of the tissues. Now add your wrists. Gentle circles in one direction, then the other. Shrug your shoulders up toward your ears. Hold for a moment, then let them drop. Feel the release. Finally, if you can, shake. Let your hands shake loosely at your sides. Let the movement travel up your arms if it wants to. Animals do this instinctively after a freeze response. After surviving a close call with a predator, they shake to discharge the frozen energy from their tissues. You might feel strange doing this. You might feel awkward or silly. Do it anyway. Your nervous system does not care about looking cool. It cares about completing the survival cycle that got interrupted. That is the full reset. Orienting, vocalization, movement. 90 seconds, maybe less once you have practiced it. If you are finding this helpful, subscribe and leave a like. It helps others find these tools. Let me explain why this works at a deeper level. When the freeze response activates, it is like your nervous system puts up a wall. Threat detected, shutdown initiated, no further input accepted. You get locked into that state because the normal pathways for signaling safety have been bypassed. What the reset does is find back doors into the system. It uses hardwired reflexes and sensory inputs that your nervous system cannot ignore. When you orient to the environment, that is a brainstem reflex operating below conscious control. When you vocalize, that is direct vagal stimulation. When you shake, that is the mammalian discharge response completing itself. None of these require you to feel safe. None of them require you to believe anything. They work mechanically, physiologically, because they are exploiting the architecture of your nervous system. This is different from trying to calm down, different from breathing exercises that require you to concentrate, different from talk therapy that engages your prefrontal cortex. The freeze response has taken your prefrontal cortex offline. You need tools that work downstream from there. Now let me talk about when and how to use this. The obvious application is in the moment of freeze. You feel yourself shutting down, going blank, losing the ability to respond. You excuse yourself for a moment if possible, run through the reset, and return to the situation with your nervous system back in a functional state. But there is a deeper application that is even more powerful. Most people who struggle with the freeze response are living with an overactive dorsal vagal system. Their nervous system has learned, usually through past experiences, that shutdown is the safest default. They are not just freezing in obvious moments, they are living in a low-grade freeze state much of the time. This shows up as chronic fatigue without medical explanation, difficulty making decisions, a sense of going through the motions without really being present, emotional numbness, difficulty connecting with others even when you want to. If this sounds familiar, daily practice of the reset can start to shift your baseline, not just pulling you out of acute freeze, but teaching your nervous system that freeze is not the only option. That ventral vagal safety is available and accessible. 5 minutes each morning, before situations you know are challenging, in the evening to clear whatever accumulated during the day. Consistent practice builds vagal tone, which is the resilience and flexibility of your autonomic nervous system. People who have practiced this for weeks report something interesting. The freeze response still gets triggered sometimes, that is just biology, but it does not last as long, and they catch it earlier. They notice the first signs of shutdown and intervene before it takes over completely. This is what nervous system regulation actually looks like, not eliminating stress responses. That would be neither possible nor desirable, but recovering faster, having more choice about your state, not getting stuck. I want to share something about the science behind this. The polyvagal theory, developed by Stephen Porges, is the framework that explains most of what I have described. It has been validated through decades of research on trauma, attachment, and autonomic function. The idea that the nervous system has 3 distinct modes, and that we can influence which mode is active through specific interventions, is not speculation. It is established neuroscience. The specific techniques I taught you draw from multiple therapeutic modalities. Orienting comes from somatic experiencing, developed by Peter Levine for trauma resolution. Vocalization techniques are used in various vagal toning practices. The shaking and movement patterns are observed across species as natural recovery mechanisms. What I have done is combine the most efficient elements into a single protocol that works quickly and requires no equipment or special training. But if you want to go deeper, there is a vast field of research and practice exploring these mechanisms. If you want a complete guide to nervous system regulation, I put together the vagus nerve reset protocol. It covers the freeze response along with other techniques for building vagal tone and autonomic flexibility. Link is in the description, but the reset I just taught you is genuinely powerful on its own. You do not need anything else to start interrupting the freeze pattern. Let me address some common questions. What if I freeze so completely that I cannot remember to do the reset? This is a real challenge, and the answer is practice. The more you run through the protocol when you are not in freeze, the more automatic it becomes. You are building a procedural memory that can activate even when your thinking brain is offline. Start practicing now in a calm moment so your body knows the sequence. Can I do this in public without looking strange? Most of it, yes. The eye movements and gentle head turns look like you are just looking around. Humming can be disguised as clearing your throat or a quiet sound under your breath. The shaking is harder to hide, but even tiny movements of your fingers at your sides can help if you cannot do more. Adapt the protocol to what is possible in your situation. What if I have been in freeze for a long time, like years? This happens more often than people realize. Long-term freeze states can become a baseline way of operating. The reset will still help, but you may need more time and consistency. Consider it physiotherapy for your nervous system. You are rehabilitating patterns that have been stuck for a while. Be patient. Change is possible. Is this a replacement for therapy? It can be a powerful complement to therapy, especially trauma-informed approaches. But if you are dealing with significant trauma history, complex PTSD, or chronic dissociation, professional support is important. This tool can help you regulate between sessions and build capacity, but it is not a substitute for working with a trained professional when needed. I want to end with something important about why this matters. The freeze response is not just uncomfortable, it is isolating. When you freeze in social situations, you miss opportunities to connect. When you freeze at work, you miss chances to contribute. When you freeze in conflicts, issues never get resolved. Over time, repeated freezing teaches you to avoid situations that might trigger it. Your life gets smaller, you take fewer risks, you hold back from relationships, from opportunities, from fully engaging with being alive. And underneath all of that is often a quiet shame, the sense that something is fundamentally wrong with you, that everyone else can handle these situations, but you cannot, that your failure to respond means you are weak or broken. I want you to know that none of that is true. You are not freezing because you are weak. You are freezing because you have a nervous system that learned, probably very early on, that shutdown was the safest response to overwhelming situations. That learning happened automatically, below your conscious awareness. You did not choose it, and you cannot simply choose to stop. But you can train a new response. You can teach your nervous system that there are other options, that it can come back online even after triggering freeze. That safety is not just possible but accessible through reliable pathways you now know how to activate. The reset I taught you is a beginning, 90 seconds to interrupt a pattern that may have been running for years or decades. 90 seconds to remind your body that it is not actually trapped, not actually helpless, not actually in mortal danger. Try it now if you want, right where you are. Let your eyes scan the room. Hum for a few seconds. Move your fingers, shrug your shoulders. Notice what shifts. This is agency. Not control over what your nervous system does, but influence. Not elimination of the freeze response, but recovery from it. The ability to unfreeze, to come back, to re-engage with life even after your body tried to shut down. That changes everything. Subscribe if you want more on nervous system science. I go deep on the mechanisms behind stress, regulation, and recovery. Not hype, not quick fixes, real research translated into tools you can use. Share this with someone who freezes, who goes blank in confrontations, who beats themselves up for not being able to respond. They need to know this is biology, not character. And there is a way through. The freeze response evolved to save your life in situations of inescapable threat. It is doing what it was designed to do. But you are not a gazelle in a lion's mouth. You are a human in the modern world with a nervous system that sometimes gets confused about what constitutes danger. Now you know how to reset it. 90 seconds. Orienting, vocalization, movement. A back door into your own neurobiology. Your nervous system has been waiting for these signals. Give them to it and see what becomes possible when freeze is no longer your default. The reset is yours now. Use it well. There is something else I want you to understand about the freeze response that most explanations miss. It is not binary. you are not either frozen or not frozen. There is a spectrum, and most people live somewhere on that spectrum without realizing it. Full freeze is obvious. You cannot move, cannot speak, feel disconnected from your body. But partial freeze is subtle. It shows up as hesitation when you want to act, a slight delay before speaking, a muted quality to your emotions, like you are feeling them through a layer of cotton. Many high-functioning people operate in partial freeze constantly. They appear normal, even successful, but there is a governor on their system, a slight brake always applied, a subtle disconnection between intention and action. If you have ever felt like you are watching your life rather than living it, like you are performing being a person rather than simply being one, you know what I mean. That is partial freeze. That is your dorsal vagal system slightly activated, keeping you just a little bit shut down as a precaution. The reset works for this too. But when you are addressing chronic partial freeze, rather than acute full freeze, you need a different approach. Daily practice, even when you feel fine. Building vagal tone over time rather than just pulling yourself out of moments. Think of it like physical fitness. You do not only exercise when you need to run from something. You build capacity so that when demands come, you have resources to meet them. Vagal tone is the fitness of your autonomic nervous system. The more you practice regulation, the more resilient and flexible that system becomes. I have talked to people who practiced the reset daily for 3 months and reported something surprising. Not just that they stopped freezing in difficult moments, but that they felt more alive in general. Colours seemed brighter, food tasted better, they laughed more easily and felt sadness more fully. This makes sense when you understand the physiology. The freeze response dampens everything. It mutes sensation, emotion, engagement. When you lift that damper, when you spend more time in ventral vagal activation, life gets more vivid, not because anything external changed, but because you are actually present for it. Let me give you some additional tools that complement the main reset. Cold water on the face activates what is called the dive reflex. Splash cold water on your face, especially around your eyes and cheeks, and your vagus nerve fires strongly. Heart rate drops, parasympathetic activation increases. This is not the same as the full reset, but it is a quick way to shift your state when you need something immediate. Slow exhales are the most portable vagal activation tool. You can do them anywhere, anytime, without anyone noticing. The key is making your exhale longer than your inhale. Breathe in for 4 counts, out for 8. The extended exhale stimulates the vagus nerve and shifts you toward parasympathetic dominance. This will not pull you out of a deep freeze, but it can prevent a mild stress response from escalating into one. Social connection, when available, is profoundly regulating. Your ventral vagal system is called the social engagement system for a reason. Eye contact, friendly voices, physical touch from safe people, these all send powerful safety signals to your nervous system. If you are prone to freezing, cultivating relationships where you feel genuinely safe is not just nice, it is physiologically protective. Time in nature has documented effects on autonomic regulation. Something about natural environments, the sounds, the visual patterns, the air, shifts the nervous system toward ventral vagal activation. Even a few minutes outside can lower your freeze threshold and build resilience for later challenges. These are not replacements for the reset. They are complementary practices that support overall nervous system health. The more regulated your baseline, the less likely you are to tip into freeze, and the faster you recover when you do. I want to talk about something that might be uncomfortable. If you freeze frequently, there is often a reason in your history. The nervous system learns from experience. When you encounter overwhelming situations, especially early in life, your nervous system takes notes. It catalogues what types of situations preceded danger, and it becomes vigilant for anything similar. This is adaptive in the short term. If a particular kind of person or situation was dangerous before, it makes sense to be cautious around similar patterns. But the nervous system often overgeneralizes. It treats anything remotely similar as the same threat, triggering the same response. This is why someone might freeze when their boss raises their voice, even though their boss is not actually dangerous. The nervous system is pattern matching to an earlier experience, maybe a parent who yelled before becoming violent. maybe a teacher who humiliated them. The current situation is not dangerous, but it rhymes with something that was. Understanding this can help you have compassion for yourself. Your freeze response is not random. It is not evidence of weakness. It is your nervous system trying to protect you based on what it learned from your life. The learning was automatic and the response is automatic. But automatic does not mean unchangeable. The nervous system learns these patterns through experience, and it can learn new patterns through new experiences. Every time you practice the reset, every time you pull yourself out of freeze and demonstrate to your system that you can handle the situation, you are updating those old patterns. This is what healing looks like at the nervous system level. Not erasing the past, not pretending it did not happen, but giving your system new data. Repeated experiences of returning to safety, of handling challenges without shutting down, gradually shift the threshold for the freeze response. It becomes harder to trigger, easier to resolve. This takes time. Patterns that developed over years or decades do not rewire overnight, but the direction of change can start immediately. Every reset is a data point. Every successful return from freeze teaches your nervous system something new. Some people find it helpful to work with a therapist who specializes in somatic approaches. Somatic experiencing, EMDR, sensoromotor psychotherapy. These modalities work directly with the nervous system rather than just talking about problems. They can accelerate the rewiring process and help with patterns that are particularly stuck. But you do not have to wait for therapy to start. The reset works, practice works. Your nervous system is capable of learning at any age, from any starting point. Let me summarize what we have covered. The freeze response is a survival mechanism, not a flaw. It is your dorsal vagal system activating shutdown mode in response to perceived overwhelming threat. It evolved to keep your ancestors alive, and it still operates in you today, sometimes in situations where it is not helpful. You cannot think your way out of freeze because it operates below conscious control, but you can use physical inputs to reset the system. Orienting to your environment, using your voice, moving your body, these create bottom-up signals that shift your autonomic state. The full reset takes about 90 seconds. Orient with your eyes and head, hum or vocalize, shake or move. This interrupts the freeze pattern and brings your ventral vagal system back online. For chronic freeze states, daily practice builds vagal tone over time. You are training your nervous system to have more flexibility and resilience. The threshold for freeze increases, the duration decreases. Complementary practices like cold water, slow breathing, social connection, and time in nature support overall autonomic health. The more regulated your baseline, the better you handle challenges. If freeze is a significant pattern in your life, understanding its origins can help. The nervous system learns from experience, especially early experience, but it can also relearn. Every successful reset is new data that updates old patterns. This is nervous system education. Not theory, not motivation, practical tools based on how your neurobiology actually works. Use what I have taught you and see what changes. The freeze response does not have to run your life. It does not have to limit your relationships, your career, your willingness to take risks and engage fully. It is biology, and biology responds to the right inputs. Now you have those inputs. 90 seconds to reset what might have felt permanent. The ability to unfreeze yourself, to come back online, to re-enter situations you previously had to avoid. Your nervous system has been waiting for this information. It wants to regulate. It wants to feel safe. It has just been missing the signals that would allow it to shift. Send those signals. See what happens. And remember, this is a practice, not a one-time fix. The more you use these tools, the more your system learns that regulation is possible, and the less you will need them. That is the goal. Not dependence on techniques, but a nervous system flexible enough to handle life without getting stuck. You have what you need. Start today. One more thing I want to address. The relationship between freeze and other stress responses. Most people think of fight or flight as the stress response, but the reality is more nuanced. Your nervous system cycles through different defensive states depending on its assessment of the threat and your options for responding. When you perceive danger and your system calculates that you have a good chance of overcoming it or escaping it, you get fight or flight, sympathetic activation, adrenaline, energy mobilized for action. But when your system calculates that the threat is too big, too fast, or too inescapable, it skips past fight or flight into freeze. Why waste energy fighting or fleeing when neither will work? Better to shut down, conserve resources, maybe survive through stillness. The problem is that these calculations happen unconsciously and almost instantaneously. Your conscious mind does not get a vote. By the time you realize what is happening, you are already frozen. And here is the complicating factor. Many people have nervous systems that default to freeze because of how they were conditioned. If you grew up in an environment where fighting back was punished and running was impossible, your system learned that freeze was the only viable option. Now it jumps to freeze even in situations where fight or flight would be perfectly appropriate. This is why someone might freeze in a confrontation they could easily win, or freeze when threatened by someone with no actual power over them. The nervous system is not assessing the current reality, it is running old programs based on old data. Resetting the freeze response is partly about updating those calculations. Every time you unfreeze and successfully handle a situation, you provide evidence that freeze is not the only option. Your system starts to recalibrate, to consider fight or flight before defaulting to shutdown. Some people notice that as they practice the reset, they start feeling more anger. This can be disconcerting if you are not expecting it, but it is often a positive sign. It means your system is moving up the defensive hierarchy from freeze toward fight. The anger was always there, suppressed beneath the shutdown. As freeze loosens its grip, the energy mobilizes. If this happens, do not judge it. The anger is not bad. It is your life force trying to move through you. Let it be there without acting on it destructively. It usually settles into something more manageable as your system continues to regulate. The ideal is not to never have stress responses. The ideal is to have appropriate stress responses that resolve naturally. A threat appears, you mobilize to handle it, the threat passes, you return to baseline. That is a healthy autonomic cycle. Freeze is what happens when that cycle gets interrupted. The energy mobilizes but cannot discharge. It gets stuck, held in the tissues, waiting for a resolution that never comes. The reset helps complete that interrupted cycle. It gives the frozen energy somewhere to go. This is why the shaking component is so important. Animals in the wild shake after surviving a predator attack. They tremble and convulse, sometimes for several minutes. Then they get up and walk away, completely recovered. No PTSD, no chronic freeze. The energy was discharged. Humans have learned to suppress this shaking. We think it looks weak or uncontrolled. We tighten against it, hold it in, refuse to let it move through us, and so the energy stays stuck. The freeze response never fully resolves. When you shake intentionally, you are completing what your body wanted to do all along. You are honouring the biological wisdom that knows how to process threat and return to equilibrium. It might look silly. It is deeply intelligent. I want to leave you with a perspective on all of this. Your nervous system is not your enemy. It is not broken, not malfunctioning, not sabotaging you. It is doing exactly what it evolved to do, trying to keep you alive based on the information it has. The freeze response is a feature, not a bug. In genuine life-threatening situations where fight and flight are impossible, it is the best remaining option. It conserves energy, reduces pain, increases the chance of survival. The problem is not the response itself. The problem is that it gets triggered inappropriately, in situations that are stressful but not actually life-threatening. The problem is that it gets stuck, not resolving when the danger passes. The problem is that your system is using outdated maps to navigate current territory. What you are learning is not how to eliminate the freeze response. You are learning how to have a better relationship with it, how to recognize when it is activating, how to assess whether it is appropriate to the actual situation, how to reset it when it is not serving you. This is nervous system literacy, the ability to read your own autonomic states and influence them skillfully. It is not taught in schools, though it should be. It is one of the most valuable skills a human can develop, because your nervous system state affects everything: your thoughts, your emotions, your perceptions, your decisions, your relationships, your health. When you are stuck in freeze, the whole world looks different than when you are in ventral vagal safety. The same situation, interpreted completely differently depending on your autonomic state. Learning to shift states means learning to access different versions of reality. The frozen version where everything is threatening and nothing is possible. The mobilized version where you have energy but no rest. The regulated version where you can think clearly, connect deeply, respond appropriately. Most people are at the mercy of their states, buffeted by autonomic shifts they do not understand and cannot influence. You are becoming someone who can work with those shifts intentionally. That is power, real power, not over others, but over your own experience of being alive. The reset is one tool in that larger project, maybe the most important tool when freeze is your pattern, but part of something bigger, a whole practice of learning to inhabit your nervous system consciously. Thank you for your attention through this. Nervous system content is not always easy to absorb. The freeze response is not a comfortable topic to explore, but understanding it is the first step to changing your relationship with it. Practice the reset. Share it with people who need it. Come back to this video when you need a reminder of the mechanics and the method. Your body knows how to unfreeze. It has always known. It just needed the right signals, delivered in the right sequence, to let the frozen energy move. Now you can give it those signals, whenever you need them, for the rest of your life. That is freedom. Not freedom from stress, but freedom from getting stuck. The ability to move through rather than getting trapped in. 90 seconds to reset. A lifetime of not being frozen anymore. Your nervous system is ready for this. Are you? If you found this valuable, subscribe for more on the science of your nervous system. I break down complex neuroscience into tools you can actually use. No fluff, no filler, just the mechanisms and methods that make a real difference. And leave a comment telling me about your experience with freeze. When does it happen to you? What situations trigger it? Your stories help me understand what to cover next, and they help other viewers feel less alone. The freeze response is one of the most misunderstood aspects of human biology. People suffer with it for years, thinking something is fundamentally wrong with them, when really it is just a nervous system doing its job too well, protecting you from threats that are not there. Now you know better. Now you have tools. Now you can reset. 90 seconds to unlock what has been frozen. Use them wisely. Until next time. One final thought to sit with. The opposite of freeze is not constant action. It is presence. The ability to be here now, responsive to what is actually happening, rather than what your nervous system fears might happen. That presence is your birthright. The freeze response has been obscuring it, but it was always there underneath. Every time you reset, you are not becoming something new. You are returning to something original. The you that existed before the patterns set in. The you that could respond freely to life. The you that was never actually broken. Welcome back.